is one of the sunshine capitals of the world, as it is warm just about all year round. People flock in their thousands to enjoy the beaches and to go boating. It is also the gateway to the Bahamas and the Caribbean, with dozens of ocean liners leaving from Fort Lauderdale and Miami.
I want to go! This bustling lifestyle is in stark contrast to the state's true treasure.
As we leave the glitz and glamour of Florida's tourist strips, we head out to some of the more remote places in Florida. We're going to take you to meet the delightful manatee in Crystal River and also to explore the Everglades National Park.
A grand adventure is laid out before me as I canoe and walk the Everglades to get close to alligators. And then take to the air to better understand panthers. Then it's on with the wetsuit for a very personal encounter with a gentle manatee. I can't help but play with the baby when I get the smiling approval from his mama. That's followed by a side trip to South Carolina to witness and film the fascinating strand-feeding behaviour of the Hilton Head bottlenose dolphins. This is the only place in the world where this behaviour is seen. But first, the Everglades is one of the great wetland environments of the world. It covers an area of 2,000 square miles from the Kissimmee River about halfway up the state of Florida to its southern tip. Parts of the Everglades have been declared World Heritage Sites, others National Park. This river of grass can change with every corner you turn. This is the only subtropical preserve in North America. Most of the plain is actually a shallow, gently flowing river hidden by sawgrass and reeds. So the best way for me to view it is by airboat. Kenny Wilkinson has lived in this area all his life, and we're hitching a ride with him.
Ready to go?
Yeah, absolutely.
All aboard.
The Everglades is defined by the rhythms of drought, flood, fire, sun, and torrential rain. This is a wonderfully wild place, one of the precious few left on the planet, and it's home to many protected bird and animal species, including the keepers of the Everglades, the alligators.
We're about 20 miles north of Tamiami Trail, about 10-15 miles south of Alligator Alley. We call this the spillway ourselves. This is pretty much where all the rednecks in the neighborhood come to swim. When we come up over this levee, you're going to see a whole bunch of alligators hanging out.
It's what we like. Oh, wow. They come here to swim, but there's a gator, there's a gator, there's a gator, there's a gator.
Yeah, it's kind of like common ground here. We all share the water.
Keeping a wary eye on those jaws in the water makes it hard to believe something as delicate as this roseate spoonbill can coexist safely with this ancient reptile. Still, this is a magic, magic place of trees, water, and gators everywhere.
There are hundreds of gators in this canal. They're to the right and left of us, and sometimes as soon as we look down from the airboat, they're right beside us as well. What is a big gator?
12, 14. It's a pretty good size one.
Yeah? They get bigger than that?
Yeah, I think records are like 16 to 18 foot.
That's big enough.
Yeah, I figure this boat's only 12 feet long.
Yeah. Oh, this is 12 foot, so they're bigger than this boat.
Yeah.
The alligator is vitally important to this area's ecology, though in the past, many believed only the value of its hide. Hunting for alligators boomed in the mid-1880s. But in 1969, the Federal Endangered Species Act protected the alligator by eliminating the trafficking in hides and therefore all hunting. During the dry season, November through May, between 50 and 100,000 wading birds collect in the wetlands of the park. The cycle of wet and dry strictly governs the populations here. But all stay under watchful and ever-hungry eyes.
We're in the southern part of the Everglades, known as the Everglades National Park. We're about to take a canoe trip through what they refer to as the 10,000 Islands.
Here it's clear to see how the park is home to vast numbers of humans as well.
As the freshwater of the Everglades meets the Gulf of Mexico, we start to see many more marine species, like this brown pelican.
The 10,000 Islands are made entirely from shells and are said to have been built by native Indians from as early as 1450 BC. They're known as the Calusa.
They are referred to as a super race by the Spanish, who were twice defeated in the early 1500s. Although the Calusa Indians were victorious, 300 years later when European man returned, these people had simply vanished.
I found the time to talk to the animals.
This super tribe was said to be 6 foot tall and extremely strong. They built whole islands out of shell and probably lived in places like this that most of us would call inhospitable.
It's great to really get close to nature here, to explore and discover with only your wits and the desire to see what's around the next bend. Despite all the surrounding alligators, which occasionally attack a human, we had the whole camping adventure.
Watch out for these guys.
And there are other snappier guys to watch out for too.
They told us we shouldn't go swimming here in these beautiful freshwater lakes. The reason is because it looks so inviting, but just over there behind me is about a 10-foot gator. You can see him watching the fish. There he is. There are dozens of alligators along this man-made canal in a very short stretch. Alligators are reptiles. That means that they're cold-blooded. So when the sun comes out, like today, they all crawl up on the banks to raise their body temperature. You can see how deep that the water gets in some of these places. This whole Everglades system works as a natural sponge. A large amount of water is trapped above the ground.
If the Everglades didn't act as that natural sponge and trap water, during drought many species might perish. 300 species of birds, 600 kinds of mammals and 45 plants are unique to or originate in the area. But life has become a fight for survival for many.
This pristine Everglades is half the size that it used to be. It used to be 4,000 square miles and they've reduced it to 2,000 square miles from development.
But we humans are starting to recognise the error of our ways, and hopefully we can return some more of the Everglades back to its original state. For me though, it was time to set up camp and try and get some sleep.
Oh. It's a bit chillier this morning. It's pretty loud last night because of all the mozzies, a whole swarm of them. Thought I was going to be carried off for a while, but we're going to venture a bit further into the woods today, as the Americans say. See what we can find. Unlike the lower wetlands of the Everglades, this land tends to be higher and drier. The higher, drier land tends to support much larger trees and much more dense undergrowth. It allows larger animals like pig, deer, turkey, and even animals like bears and panthers. Perhaps we'll see one.
Panthers have been part of this ecosystem for eons, and the Calusa Indians depicted this powerful predator in their art.
It gets pretty dense here on the ground, so any chance you can get a higher point of view is definitely worth the look. These old hunting platforms provide a perfect vantage point.
A quick look didn't reveal much, though I think my winged friend up there could tell a different story. Everglades National Park is currently conducting research on the panthers. Daryl Land wants to know how many panthers live here and where they range.
Well, panthers need some kind of cover where they can do several things. They like cover to rest in, where they might spend half of a day just kind of in a thick palmetto patch, cooling their heels. They also need areas that support their prey items, white-tailed deer and hogs, so they need accessibility to food as well as to have that cover. And that usually means, down here at least, forested areas that have the thick undergrowth.
Daryl prepared the light plane for tracking down the already radio-collared panthers.
Well, it's really hard to say how many panthers there were originally. Surely Florida must have had hundreds to thousands of panthers before we came in and started taking away their territory. But throughout the range, there had to be at least 10 or 20,000 cats.
Through this radio tracking system, it can be determined that if a panther has remained in the same place for more than 2 days, it's safe to assume that it's feeding on a kill.
It costs a lot to catch a panther, to put the radios on it, and then we'll spend $30,000, $40,000 a year flying over them to get these locations.
For thousands of years, the Everglades has evolved into a finely balanced ecosystem that forms a massive biological infrastructure for the southern half of Florida. There are areas here that have not been greatly impacted by man, and they sustain life as they have for centuries. The main problem here is the man-made canals and pollution. $300 million has gone into the preservation of the Everglades. Their annual budget is over $13 million. You'd have to agree, protecting a unique wilderness like this is worth every cent. Coming up, I dive with the original mermaids of the deep. You've seen some beautiful and dangerous wildlife here in the Everglades, but now we need to go below the surface and meet the bizarre but gentle critters that call this place home, the Florida manatee.
We're in Crystal River, Florida, and in the wintertime when the waters get cold, the manatees move into these hot springs to seek refuge. This allows some people the opportunity to have manatees in their backyard. For others, it allows them to come and swim with the gentle sea cow.
They graze for food along the bottom and also feed near the surface, where they consume 10 to 15% of their body weight daily in vegetation. When not eating, manatees rest submerged on the bottom or just below the water's surface, coming up to breathe about every 3 to 5 minutes. When travelling, they breathe as often as every 30 seconds. With no natural enemies, manatees can live 60 years or more. Unfortunately, most manatee mortalities are human-related. It's their need to breathe that brings them into contact with powerboats.
Take note, idle speed, no way. This is a very important message. More manatees are injured or killed every year from boat propeller wounds than any other cause. So while we're here at Crystal River, we must adhere to all the safety precautions in order to protect our little friends.
Nearly every manatee has powerboat scars, and they're so common, they're used to help identify individual animals. To really get to know a creature, I like to visit them in their environment. It's a thrill when you see an animal in the wild. And I've landed in the thick of a nursery group with mothers and calves. One young calf was eager to play. This little guy was my newfound friend. He loved to scratch on the back and really took to the camera. After a while, Mother thought Junior had played enough. It was time for supper. She didn't take him far. Then Junior nestled under her arm. This is where her teat is found. Manatees have fairly good eyesight, even though their eyes are tiny. Their teeth are marching molars, which means they are constantly being replaced. These molars form at the back of the jaw, wear down as they move forward, and eventually fall out. An adaptation to deal with the manatee's diet of abrasive plants with mouthfuls of sand. Like many grazing marine animals, manatees often have algae or barnacles growing on their backs. However, there is a trick to getting clean, and I followed one of the manatees to a secret spot in the springs. These crystal clear springs lie nestled amongst the tranquil forest. it's like entering a sacred place. The manatee cruises through the pristine stream before entering the deeper spring. They take up a floating position, and like clockwork, a group of cleaner fish come in and start feeding. They work tirelessly from head to tail, while the manatee is motionless, except for the occasional breath. It's a perfect symbiotic relationship. The last aerial survey in 2003 counted 3,000 manatees. Florida has tens of thousands of miles of tidal waters, rivers, streams and canals. The water used to flow through to the Atlantic Ocean, but it's all been dammed up by development. Canal locks are a huge problem for manatees, who need to swim up and down streams. But it's also the never-ending development, stormwater runoff and pollution that is really threatening their food sources and habitat. Development will continue till there is no land left. So it's up to us to respect the manatees' right to live in their natural habitat. Coming up, I scoot over to South Carolina to observe a fishing technique the local dolphins employ that is unique in the world.
I am at the most southern part of South Carolina at Hilton Head Island. The island lies along the Savannah River, which forms a natural boundary between South Carolina and Georgia. But the real reason I've come to Hilton Head Island is to see the unique feeding behaviour of bottlenose dolphins known as strand feeding.
So it was off to find the guy who specialises in finding this fascinating dolphin behaviour, Tom Doyle.
Looks like a nice day.
It's absolutely brilliant. The tide is low. With any luck, we'll see some strand feeding out there today, Lynn.
Yeah.
The Atlantic bottlenose dolphins we were looking for are not trained or tamed. They're wild. So there's no one special spot this behaviour actually takes place.
Oh, he's right there. Wonderful.
They're migratory, meaning they're only here for a small part of the year, when the water is warm. They'll feed until the waters start to get cold again. That's when they head south, where there's more fish in the winter. Hilton Head plays host to this migratory population, but has its own resident population of dolphins as well.
Let's turn off the engine here, guys, and watch and see what the dolphin's doing.
He's looking for fish. You see that tail fin beating the water? Sometimes lifting the fish out of the water? He's stunning it for an easy meal. You can see the intelligence of this species, how they're working cooperatively. This was a great start.
Well, let's go back to Dolphin Cove and see if we see any strand feeding.
Okay.
All right? Here we go.
We're in the salt marsh, which is the only place to see the Atlantic bottlenose dolphin strand feed. The dolphins feed 2 hours either side of the low tide, which is when they can chase the small fish up onto the mud flat.
There's an animal out in front of us there. That's a good indication. It was right up off the bow.
This dolphin is cruising parallel to the beach. Then he'll do what is known as a spy hop. That is a stand by to action signal. Then the signal is given and they charge the shoreline. Interestingly, when they hit the shoreline or beach themselves, they do it on their right pectoral side 100% of the time. The reason for this is unknown. And normally they'll do this in a strict pecking order. The lead dolphin will be furthest to the left as you face the beach, all the way down to the youngest. This hunting technique is performed with from 1 to 6 animals at a time. The behaviour is repeated as long as there are fish to chase. Sometimes a great blue heron will benefit from this reverse fishing technique too.
The fish were out in front in the middle. They came in a V formation, creating that bow wave, and they met at the apex right at the shoreline. And then we saw the fish then get thrown up onto the beach in the bow wave.
That was pretty cool, huh?
It was incredible. Oh, we have one right over there too.
Right at Inspiration Point. Just here.
I want to see what's going to happen. There's 3 of them, and they spread out, and they regroup, and they spread out and regroup.
This is a classic sign. They begin to circle, indicating a setup to stranding. And 2 rush the beach and feast.
Males and females both engage in the strand feeding. You notice this was a group of three, and the one was a younger calf. Now he wasn't engaging in the strand feeding. It tends to be the groups or the pods of dolphins that live primarily in this marsh environment. Now they will move around quite a bit. We do know that they'll work one area and then they'll be gone for, say, a week until we see them reappear again.
But a few of the dolphins seem to think, forget fishing, it's time for a little love. But seconds later, it's back to the most amazing fish-catching behaviour in the world of dolphins. As I said, this strand-feeding foraging technique only happens within 2 hours of the low tide, and it's done night or day. When it comes to fishing, you've got to know how to work a local spot. These dolphins certainly do that very well. They're the only ones on the planet that do.
We've had an incredible couple of days with the dolphins around Hilton Head Island. It's amazing to see how animals learn to adapt and survive in their surroundings. Strand feeding takes communication and cooperation between dolphins who have learnt to use the tide and salt marsh flats to catch their food. This is the only place in the world where dolphins use this feeding technique. Whatever you do, respect the environment and enjoy it.